So good morning, everybody. I think that this conference is a very good proof that all Mediterranean countries are heavily investing in wastewater treatment. Many others are investing in desalination and general and non-conventional water resources. So practically, we are producing more water. So the question is why our farmers continue to face increasing uncertainty regarding water availability. It's not only about climate change, no? So this is a fundamental question. We are producing more water, but we are not able to produce more resilience. So I would like somehow today to argue that challenge that is no longer how to mobilize additional water resources, but the challenge is how to increasingly govern complex systems, not infrastructure, complex hybrid water systems. In that way, that agriculture becomes sustainable over time. This is not moving? Okay. So I would like to start from the broader context. Everybody knows that the Mediterranean is one of the most water-stressed regions in the world. And the projection as well, in a business-as-usual scenario, they suggest that the situation is likely to intensify over the coming decades. But I believe there is a subtle shift that deserves our attention. Traditionally, we spoke about scarcity. But today, farmers are confronted not with scarcity only, but with something different, that is uncertainty. Rainfall is becoming less predictable. Droughts are becoming more frequent and prolonged. So water availability is becoming less reliable from one season to the next. So perhaps the Mediterranean is not only having a water shortage problem, we have a reliability problem. So the challenge is not anymore having less water. It's about being less certain when, where, and under what conditions water is made available. And because uncertainty affects primarily agriculture, agriculture becomes the test for resilience. This is why agriculture is the test for a resilient or not Mediterranean. Agriculture in the Mediterranean remains the most dominant water user. In many countries, the irrigation accounts for roughly 2/3 of the water availability or the water withdrawals. This means that instability in water resources is ultimately translated into an agricultural risk. This is why we speak about agriculture when we speak about water in the Mediterranean. So the agricultural resilience becomes a central component when we talk about regional water security. So if agriculture cannot adapt to uncertainty, neither can our water systems. So the question is how our countries are responding. And let me talk about the Mediterranean and not northern country of the Mediterranean. The natural response has been a business-as-usual response to diversify the water sources. So across the region, treated wastewater, desalinated water, rainwater harvesting are increasingly viewed as strategic resources or assets. And rightly, there are so. However, something important is missing. or is changing. These resources are not anymore operating independently. They are increasingly being combined with conventional sources. And here I come back to the previous speech. This is not about adding resources, it's about integrating resources. And this is the challenge. We are integrating resources with different qualities, different costs, different reliability levels, environmental implications. So we have to move first as a mindset from water management to system management. The countries differ considerably in their technical capacities, in the institutional arrangements, and the level of investments they can afford. Tunisia and Palestine, for example, they still operate largely within partial reuse configuration. Spain has developed a highly advanced but regional differentiated system. You know very well that many regions are more advanced than other regions. Jordan, for example, has achieved an extensive integration through the centralized management of wastewater. Israel has developed perhaps the most integrated model. They combine treated wastewater, desalination, they blend strategies, and they apply adaptive irrigation practices. Despite all of these differences, the trajectory is it's only one. None of these countries are managing a water as a single source. They are managing a combination of sources. So water reuse is not a technology question anymore. It's not an infrastructure-only question anymore. It is a system integration question. And this is why, allow me to speak about what we call the infrastructure use or reuse disconnect. We examined some of the experiences around the Mediterranean, and I believe that we face a paradox. We have become more or less good at producing reclaimed water. We are much less successful at transforming that water into agricultural resilience. Across multiple countries, we observe what it might be called the infrastructure use disconnect. In Morocco, for example, treatment capacity has expanded in a potential way, yet only a relatively small share of treated wastewater reaches the agricultural reuse. In Tunisia, infrastructure exists, but agricultural uptake remains very limited. In Egypt, I don't know if you know about Bahr al-Baqar treatment plant. It is the largest at world level. This treatment plant demonstrates extraordinary engineering capacity. So this is not the challenge. But the effectiveness of that treatment plant would depend on how well this plant is connected to a conveyance system, to energy supply, and especially to farm-level adaptation, because it has to serve agriculture. So the pattern is remarkably consistent. The limiting factor is rarely the treatment technology itself. It is the whole surrounding system. Distribution networks, economic incentives, institutional coordination, farmer confidence, and social acceptance. So infrastructure does not automatically become usable water. And this suggests that the real bottleneck may not be technical, it is systemic. If infrastructure defines what is technically possible, the systems determine what is actually used, and this is a huge difference. So resilience Therefore, it emerges as not an infrastructure alone, but we have to move from infrastructure that shall be embedded within functioning socio-technical systems. The Mediterranean has actually, to say it in very simple words, the Mediterranean has learned how to build treatment plants. We are still learning how to make our farmers using that water. And this observation leads us to another often overlooked dimension. In the water arena, water people talk about water with water people. But there is a hidden dimension that usually we don't speak about. So the experience suggests that the perspective of water use that focus primarily on water is incomplete, because the soils respond differently. The soil remembers. Water managers, I'm a hydraulic engineer. We think in years. The soil responds in decades. What does it mean? It means that this mismatch may be one of the hidden challenges of the Mediterranean water reuse. Salinity accumulation, nutrient imbalances, structural changes often develop slowly and remain invisible during the early stages of implementation. As a result, what appears today as efficient may create constraints tomorrow if we are not accounting for it from the early beginning. So what happened to be sustainable in the short term may prove problematic over the longer term. And this is why the most important program now at EU level, where international cooperation is most welcome, is the soil mission. So the resilience cannot anymore be evaluated through immediate performance indicator. It's not production. Am I able to produce with the same quality within 1 or 2 years? This is not the question. It must be evaluated through long-term soil trajectories. So if adaptive governance is the objective, the next question becomes, how do we learn? How do we learn to manage these long-term dynamics? Having in mind that the Mediterranean is not facing a technical problem with a single water solution, we are facing a regional transition toward hybrid systems operating under different climatic, institutional, and socioeconomic conditions. This is where the cooperation projects become important, and this conference also is a tangible proof of it. They are not simply research or implementation projects. They do and they have to function as regional learning infrastructure. So we start with testing. In these programs or projects, we test. And this allows us to understand how non-conventional water resources perform under real agricultural conditions, including salinity stress, soil constraints, and hybrid irrigation systems. But testing alone is not enough. Otherwise, the experiences will stay local. So we have to transform them into learning. That is the role of knowledge exchange, policy dialogue, and regional capitalization. And at the same time, many Mediterranean landscapes, they are already degraded. So adaptation is not only about managing water differently, it is also about rebuilding the soil-water systems through watershed restoration, erosion control, and nature-based solutions or approaches. Then, scaling. The objective is not a successful pilot. The objective is an institutional adoption or embedding. So the transition succeeds only when farmers, water agencies, policymakers integrate non-conventional water resources into long-term governance systems. So collectively, these projects create a pathway from the experimentation to the institutional transformation. And what you read, Minawara, Marsadef, Tanit, Medway Cap, the regional non-conventional water resources networks, all of these are examples of programs, of projects from different donors where Siyambari is involved, working at national level, at regional level as well. Now, just to wrap up a little bit, water governance for decades has focused primarily on allocating water among the competing users. You remember the sectoral competition between industry, agriculture, tourism? This is necessary. This is a necessary approach, but it's not enough. Hybrid systems force us to manage something that is much more complex than water. They force us to manage the interactions between water quality, soil processes, agricultural practices, and institutional decisions. This is why soil becomes a strategic governance variable, especially when we are talking about hybrid water system. So it's not water component talking about agriculture by itself. This means, and this is block 2, that monitoring can no longer be viewed as a reporting exercise. Monitoring has to drive adaptation. So the objective is to detect trends before they become degradation problems. And ultimately, governance itself must become adaptive. So instead of reacting to the problems after they emerge, institutions need mechanisms for continuous learning, adjustment, and coordination. So the challenge is not anymore allocating water, finding more water. It's stewarding soil-water systems over time. Otherwise, we are going nowhere with the sustainability. And that is fundamentally a different governance paradigm. It's not the water governance system. Let me conclude with 3 messages that I hope that will be take-it-home messages. First, we need to think beyond technologies and manage non-conventional water resources as hybrid systems, connecting water, soils, institutions, and users. Perhaps the most important lesson emerging from the Mediterranean reuse experiences is that water reuse has exposed the limits of the traditional water governance. Managing a single water source is fundamentally different from governing hybrid systems composed of multiple sources, so multiple qualities, multiple actors, and long-term soil responses. Second, the long-term sustainability depends on monitoring soils as carefully as we do in monitoring water quality, because many impacts emerge only over time. And third, infrastructure alone is not enough. Successful scaling depends on institutions, on incentives, on coordination, and the trust. And this leads us to a central conclusion. The Mediterranean has already demonstrated that it can produce more water. The next challenge is learning how to govern it. Thank you very much.